What's going on, everybody? It's Core here, and today we're going to talk about probably the most controversial and possibly biggest piece of news that relates to us racing game fans and the racing game community in general of this year. Electronic Arts has agreed to purchase Codemasters. I never thought I would be saying these words ever, but the deal is going to be finalized early next year in 2021. I read the news this morning, and it looks like EA, publishers of Need for Speed and owners of the Need for Speed IP, are going to take control of Codemasters, makers of Dirt and Grid and F1, so on and so forth. So in this video, I'm going to talk about briefly what I think of this acquisition, and also I will briefly cover all the possible outcomes of this predicament. So let's get started. So before I get into all the possible outcomes of EA purchasing Codemasters, I wanted to briefly express my opinions on all of this that's happening. Some people might wonder what I think of EA purchasing Codemasters and what kind of effect that will have. So I wanted to get that out of the way first. What do I think will happen now that EA owns Codemasters? The answer is, I don't know. Neither do you, and neither does anybody else except the suits at EA and the suits at Codemasters. It's not the best idea in the world to start making predictions now, before the deal has even been finalized. It's not the best idea in the world to think about what's going to happen, whether this means loot boxes in the Dirt games or whatever. We don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know what the plan is. Only the suits and the departments in each company know what's going to happen after this acquisition. So I don't know, but I am curious. I want to see what happens, and I would advise not to make predictions and conclusions about this until we actually see what's going to happen. So now that I've got that out of the way, let's talk about all the possible outcomes of EA acquiring Codemasters. There's almost a dozen of them, and I'm not going to go into them in great detail in this video because I'll be here for 30 minutes to an hour. But I'm just going to go over some of the ones that seem likely or not very likely, kind of briefly. So let's go ahead and get started with a very likely scenario of this acquisition, and that's Codemasters assisting Criteron in the development of Need for Speed. Now, if you're a racing game fan, you don't need me to tell you that Codemasters is quite good at making racing games. They're polished, well, for the most part anyway, they're polished, they're fun to play, they have tons of cool features in them. The visuals are always good. Sound design is second to none. So I think that Codemasters' knowledge of racing games that they've acquired over the past 20-something years would definitely be a good helping hand in the development of Need for Speed. There's a lot of stuff that the Need for Speed games need doing right now. Obviously, I've made several videos on that already. And Codemasters could potentially help Criteron, and they could also help them get all these features and polish in there faster, because currently I believe Criteron is something like 100 staff. Codemasters is over 400 staff members, so they could just pass around certain elements of each game and they could assist them, and we could get a better game in the end. Now obviously I don't think this will take effect immediately because I think it's a bit late in Need for Speed's development cycle for Codemasters to lend the helping hand, but maybe in the next game in 2023, we could see something like this happen, but again, this is just speculation, don't quote me on it. Now, here's another possible scenario of the acquisition. EA could hand the Need for Speed IP to Codemasters, and Criteron could hopefully start making Burnout again, or that cancelled action sports quote-unquote racing game that they teased at E3 2014. I don't know if you guys remember, but it was basically you're hanging off a helicopter, you jump onto an ATV, stuff like that. It was a prototype, very early prototype, unfinished graphics, but that project was canceled for, I actually don't remember why, but with Codemasters taking Need for Speed, possibly, Criteron could focus on that, making that game again, maybe bringing it back from the dead, or they could give us a brand new Burnout game, which would be totally awesome, but I don't think this is all that likely to happen. Next up, another scenario of the Codemasters acquisition is licensing. So, Need for Speed's current licenses, car brands are fine for Need for Speed. There's tons of cool car brands in the game. Admittedly, the variety is a bit hit or miss in my opinion, but there's tons of cool, interesting cars and car brands in Need for Speed currently, and Codemasters owns licenses to other brands and other models that maybe Criterion could use, but more importantly, Codemasters also owns a variety of licenses to aftermarket brands. So if you look at the decals you can put on your car in Project Cars 3, there's just about everything there. It's like early 2000s street racing game level of decals. So stuff that we've never seen in Need for Speed before. And since Slightly Mad Studios is under Codemasters' roof, this is totally possible for Need for Speed to get more licensed brands and in turn more customization and decals in the wrap editor, assuming they don't mess that up next year, of course. Next up is a kind of a big one. This could totally happen. A proper Fast and Furious game, or at least a Fast and Furious DLC for Need for Speed. So, you know, Slightly Mad Studios and in turn Codemasters currently owns the Fast and Furious license. Sadly, the game that they made thanks to that license ownership was absolutely terrible. One of the worst, possibly the worst racing game of 2020 and maybe even the past few years. And, you know, everyone basically has always wanted the Need for Speed franchise to combine with Fast and Furious since, you know, the Fast and the Furious is what inspired Need for Speed Underground and the more recent games in the first place. So if we don't get a proper, you know, full-on separate standalone Fast and Furious game, a proper one with actual street racing and its own storyline that's not a bullshit cash grab like Crossroads was, at least we can maybe expect the Fast and Furious DLC for Need for Speed. Maybe not next year, but certainly in the future games. And I think that's going to be an awesome thing if it happens. Next up, a very interesting tidbit that I want to discuss. You all saw this coming. It's about this certain Japanese automaker that we have no idea what they're doing in terms of their licensing and racing games. That's right, I'm talking about Toyota, of course. So, Fast and Furious Crossroads recently got the new Supra, and you can't drive it because it's multiplayer only and every single lobby is empty on every single platform. But the GR Supra is also in Project Cars 3, and the Mark IV Supra recently got added as well. Now, I am not the most understanding in terms of licenses. What the hell did I just say? I don't understand licensing that much, even though my friend Carlos Club Sport, he explained it to me in great detail. I appreciate it, but there's a few gray areas in my memory about license and my knowledge of licensing. This could either mean that Toyota down the road is removed from Slightly Mad Studios' games, or maybe this could mean that Toyota might actually make an appearance in Need for Speed, maybe not next year, but maybe in DLC or in the next game in 2023 or whenever they decide to release it, because the Codemasters acquisition, if any of the previous supposed things happen, it could have an effect on when each Need for Speed game is actually released. Next up is what I like to call the Criterion Black Box Alternation formula. I know I need to stop coming up with ridiculous names for basic things, but that's just what I do. But basically, this is an idea that EA had in the early 2010s when Criterion was supposed to make a racing game one year and then Black Box the next year to appeal to different audiences each year. But that might not work all that well in the modern racing game climate. Need for Speed already has an identity crisis. It could lead to franchise fatigue, perhaps, and this might not work all that well. The only possible way that they could implement this is for Codemasters and Criterion, like I said previously, to work together on live service and development, assets, features, borrowing from one another, that sort of thing. But each studio developing a different Need for Speed game every year, not gonna work at all. That basically covers everything that I think will happen with EA acquiring Codemasters and what kind of effect that will have on the respective companies' IPs. I've said briefly, but this video is almost 11 minutes long, so I think I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments below what you think of the EA Codemasters acquisition. Also, check me out on Twitter. There will be a link in the description. And I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.